Alrighty, in this video I'm going to briefly go over adjustments that you can do to the window track and associated parts to the window function to improve the raising and lowering of your windows. Now I've made a custom door panel here, so I'm going to take that off. Now I have rebuilt these doors with new window rubber. I did not replace the guides in the window lifter because I install electric windows, and I've discovered that the guides are not the problem when it comes to window binding, at least with the electric thing. Now, one of the reasons that, let's put it this way, every GT I've ever had, and I've had 6, had the exact same problem when you crank the window up. You get about 2 inches from the top, and all of a sudden the window starts to bind, and you really have to crank it like crazy to get it to go up the last 2 inches. You'll also kind of notice that the window is sort of tilting. Well, I feel that the reason for this is they made a mistake when they designed the window lifter by putting the pulley off center. The cable is more or less lifting with a straight pull from the bottom up to the pulley. But because the pulley is off center, as the cable gets up to here, it starts to go on an angle to get to the pulley. This means that the cable is pulling sideways at the window lifter, cocking it and causing sideways friction on this side of the window lifter. As you may, if you have seen my electric window video, you'll recall that I reposition the pulley, which is normally bolted right here. I reposition it so that its cable, as it comes off of the pulley, follows straight down, and when the window lifter is brought all the way to the top, it's a perfect straight line with the clamp. All right, so that, I believe, is the biggest reason why our windows bind 2 inches from the top. Why do they wait until the top to bind? They don't bind down here, they don't bind down here, they bind 2 inches from the top. And the only explanation I have is that that pulley is off center. I don't get any kind of binding with my electric window set up the way I do it. And it takes 4 seconds for my Honda electric windows to go up and down. No binding, no slowing down. I didn't replace the guides, and replacing the guides is a pain in the butt. You gotta drill out rivets and so forth. Right now, I'm of the belief that in many cases, replacing the guides in the window lifter may not actually be necessary. Okay, so let's say you did my electric window mod. Or let's say you still have the hand crank windows. All right, so let's look at the things that can bind your windows or make them fight you. You got to loosen everything up when you install the electric window mechanisms, and it's a good idea if you're putting new window rubber all the way around and you're putting new guides in and you're sanding and polishing your slider bar. You should loosen all the associated parts that deal with the alignment of the windows. That would be the top two bolts up here, the top of the window slider bar. The two bolts down here at the bottom of the slider bar, you want them loosened so that they can kind of wiggle freely with very little effort. All right? There are two bolts underneath the front window track with oval slots that go right to left. And here's the thing. Most people don't close their Opel GT window by grabbing the door handle and slamming it. These cars are pretty short. That door handle's, you have to actually bend over a little bit to get to the door handle. So what do people do? They grab the top of the door and close it. Well, after 50 years of slamming the door, and let's say you left your seat belt sticking out the door, when it slams and you're pressing, you bend the window frame ever so slightly. And this causes it to be tilted out of whack. From the factory, the window track is pushed this way and bolted tight in place. That would be a lean this way. As this window frame gets sort of bent over the years, it would be advantageous if the window track was slightly pushed that way. Now, this is just my personal opinion, so I'm not saying that I've researched this with hundreds of doors, but these are my observations, having done the electric window modification to 4 doors and having had 6 GTs that all had the same exact problem. So, loosen those 2 bolts. Physically move it, because paint and other things like Rusty Jones stuff is going to make it stick. Make sure that thing can flex, and maybe even give it a shove inwards a little bit. Another thing that can bind your windows is this rail here. The slider bar is attached to this bolt-on piece of metal, and these 6 little screws, little sheet metal screws, hold it in place. They are in slotted holes. Loosen those up. Another thing is your door panel. Now, an original Opel GT door panel has a whole bunch of little clips sticking out of holes, and the whole door panel is just kind of pressed on where it's made out of cardboard down here. This upper part's made out of steel, and it doesn't want to bend. And they put a screw in the front and in the back. Well, what I discovered on my previous car is that when I had those screws in those holes, it slowed the window down. I loosened those screws and it went up and down just fine. So on my custom door panels, now obviously the solution for you if you have original door panels is loosen the screws. Don't have them super tight. On my custom door panels, I don't put any screws into the top at all. I leave that free floating. It's not going anywhere. And what I do is I put a decorative stainless steel sheet metal screw here, 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 and here. Basically at the four corners. So what you want to then do, you've got one more thing. You may have cut your cable housings a little too short. Take a look at where I have these bolts. They're roughly at the best location. I probably cut the housings just a little bit short. And it would be really nice if that bolt was right here and these two bolts were slid over here a bit. It is what it is. It still works just fine. All right. So, but it might be that you've got your motor, if you're trying to get your windows go up and down and one of them is slow, it might be that you have the motor cocked one way or the other and it's creating a bind in the cable. So be aware of that when you're marking your holes and when you're positioning your motor, that you've got fairly smooth flow of your cables with no sharp bends. Okay, so with everything loose, these bolts loose, those bolts loose, those bolts loose, these screws loose, and you have healthy window rubber, you would make your windows go up and down, okay? Totally unrestricted should be about 4 seconds, maybe 5. Then start and observe if you see movement in these bolts, as the top and bottom bolts, as you're moving the window up and down. That will give you an indicator of where the window track and the slider bar want to be. Progressively start tightening things. The first thing I would tighten would be, well, let's go down here. Tighten this first. See how that works out. This is not really very adjustable down here. It doesn't move much. So tighten this down, operate the window. Does it go up and down okay? Next thing to do is observe the function at the front here. And if you don't see any in and out movement as the window goes up and down, well, just tighten it wherever it's at. Don't push it one way or the other, just tighten it wherever it's at. And once again, repeat your test up and down to make sure it hasn't affected the smooth movement of your window. Next, of course, is tighten these screws up, tighten these screws, verify that the window goes up and down. Once you have all the bolts tight, well, that's it. Next, put your door panel on and make sure that the wiper here on the outside of the window is not pushing or binding against the glass. I chose not to replace this with the replacement rubber that we can get, and I'm using the original one. These doors were in pretty good shape when I got them. They had been stored for 25 years, so they weren't terribly worn out or dried out. This edge right here could be pressing against the glass. Once again, if you don't put the screws in, this top part can move pretty freely or independently of the lower part. And that's about it as far as getting your windows to move freely. All right?